The Warpcoven, a kill team list that has made quite the journey from Compendium Thousand Suns into what we have now. Several data slates of tinkering later, and we find ourselves at the Q2 2023 update, and I feel like they might finally be in a good place. The Rubric Marines are now on par with other elite teams with their base 3 APL, without losing the flavor of weakening based on positioning. More attacks for melee. The Exalted Astartes strategic ploy was updated a while ago with great benefits for most of the team. All of these functions combine to form one of my favorite elements of the grimdark future, an armored force filled with an abundance of trickery and magic behind them to bend the very rules of reality to your whim over the course of a game. Also, bird horse people, for if you're into that. Real quick, thanks for stopping by. This is YouTube, so if you are interested in tabletop gaming, including things like Kill Team, Big 40K, and potentially more things down the road, and you are new to the channel, don't forget to tap that subscribe button, maybe the like if you're interested. And just a heads up, we have a Discord community linked in the description below if you would like to join up, talk about gaming, show off your projects. Always a fun time. Now, let's take a look at these dusty golems and see what they bring to the kill zone. A lot of the Warpcoven function is based around their sorcerers. These characters are key in your efforts towards winning games, and the core team abilities are centered around them. The boons of Tzeentch are the first step in customization of a sorcerer unit. These also work on Tzaangor units in narrative, but we'll stick to matched play here. There are 3 main schools of boons with 3 sub-boons. These can be randomized if you want. For matched, I feel like picking is going to be the primary method of gaining them. You cannot pick the same boon for multiple units, but you could get them randomly the same. This could be good, but I'd imagine you would need to roll in person to prove your units all didn't just happen to get fly or 4+ invulnerables. The boons of mutation start with Warp Swell for +1 to the normal damage of melee weapons. Mutant Appendage for a once per turn reduction in cost to pick up actions or mission actions by 1, down to potentially 0. And Avian Talons, which allows a unit that charged and didn't roll a crit to use 1 normal roll as a crit. The School of Fate starts with Patron of Destiny, a once per turning point free command reroll on shooting or fighting or defense rolls that has a chance at breaking based on a d6 roll that you have to make. Incorporeal Sight, which provides non-psychic power ranged weapons. The unit is equipped with the Lethal 5 and No Cover rules. And Time Walker, which provides the unit +1 to its melee attack characteristics for all melee weapons, as well as +1 inch to the movement characteristic. The last boon school is Aetheric. This starts with Immaterial Flight, which applies the fly keyword to the operative. Crystalline, which improves the unit's save by 1, and Empiric Ward, which gives the unit a 4+ invulnerable. A second level of customization for the sorcerers comes from their choice of Psychic Discipline. 3 disciplines in total, each with 3 powers. When sorcerers are added to the roster, you can pick any of the schools for them to follow. The only limit for these is that each power can only be used once per turning point normally. From the Destiny discipline, the sorcerer would have access to Weave Fate. Targeting a visible Warpcoven operative would give it the ability to reroll all defense dice from shooting attacks. Twist Destiny selects 1 visible enemy and, for the rest of the turning point, doesn't allow it to reroll ranged or melee attacks. As well, it negates any positive APL modifiers it may have. The attack that this school offers is a solid single target option. 4 attacks on a 3+ to hit with a 3/3 damage line and the Lethal 5 Mortal Wounds 2 special rule. The Tempiric discipline has Ephemeral Instability, a map-wide debuff for charging and dashing, reducing those 2 move options by 2 inches until the end of the turning point. Extremely powerful for field control. Temporal Manipulation is a 2d3 heal for any Warpcoven operative within 6 inches of the caster. The Flux Blast ranged attack comes with 4 attacks, hitting on 3 up with a 3/4 damage line, Blast 2, and Rending. The Warp Fire discipline has Warp Portal. This gives the sorcerer the ability to lift an ally within 3 inches of it, including itself, and to replace that unit on the field up to 6 inches away from the sorcerer's current location. That operative could not have moved during the turning point and wouldn't be allowed to move after the teleport occurred. Infernal Fire selects a visible enemy, and for the rest of the turning point allows any Warpcoven unit that either fights or shoots it to reroll any or all attack dice it rolls against it. Firestorm comes with 5 attacks at a 4+ to hit with a 2/2 damage line. Barrage, Blast 1, and Indirect as well. Not the best blast or damage or chance to hit, but it is a field-wide indirect, good for harassing units hugging cover. This is a lot of abilities and functions to access for the sorcerers. It makes it a little difficult to manage, and you will probably need cheat sheets ready for the ones you pick. Let's take a look at the ploys that will further Tzeentch's goals with the presence of the Warpcoven in the kill zone. Exalted Astartes, as stated, received a bunch of extra functions from an older data slate. This is the double shoot, double fight stratagem. If a sorcerer is activated and has not shot, it can double fight. If it has not fought, it can double shoot, with some caveats. Sorcerers are not allowed to double shoot with the same ranged weapon, so they would have to use their gun and spell for this function. Rubric Marines only gain double shoot from this, and if the unit is a gunner, it must spend 2 action points on the second volley of shots. Zangors are unaltered by this ploy. Psychic Dominion allows sorcerers to manifest 2 psychic powers during its activation. Each would still cost an action point, of course. Slow and Purposeful affects the Rubric Marines. If they had not moved during their action and the warp portal isn't considered a move, that Marine can reroll all of a single result from a shooting attack. That is to say, if your Inferno Bolt Gun drops 3 2s and a 1 for a complete set of misses, you can choose to reroll all 2s to see what happens. Savage Herd is one of the few Zangor-specific ploys. It allows you to retain a single dice in melee as a normal hit. If there is another Zangor in combat supporting you, you can retain this dice as a crit instead. The tactical ploys involve Capricious Plan. At the end of a sorcerer's turn, you can perform a free dash and change your order. Massively useful for hit and fade tactics. Psychic Cabal allows a sorcerer to use a spell from an allied sorcerer's Psychic School during its activation, as long as it is within 6 inches. Mutant Herd provides an activated Zangor a pseudo-group activation. You can select another Zangor unit within 3 inches to activate just after. Schemes of Change is a very unique concept in Kill Team. This allows the Warpcoven to discard a Tac-op and replace it with another from either the chosen archetype or faction if you don't have another faction Tac-op currently in play. You do lose the score gained, but if you realize how impossible a chosen mission might be, or maybe how much more easily achieved one you could have picked would be, this gives you the freedom to do so. Extreme level of meta alteration that should be expected of the denizens of Tzeentch. Speaking of Tac-ops. The Warpcoven have access to the security and recon Tac-ops, but this is dependent on what kind of units you are bringing. More Astartes units gives you security, more Zangors gives you recon. The faction Tac-ops are as multi-tiered as you would expect from Tzeentch. Scry's secret must be revealed in turn 1 and your opponent chooses a unit that has a secret. A sorcerer must get within 6 inches of that unit and spend an action point to gain that secret. You can only do this once per game. That sorcerer must then survive through the end for full score. Sorceress Ritual is revealed when the first activation of it occurs. The mission action has to be performed by a sorcerer within 2 inches of a ritual site, which can either be the center of the kill zone or an objective more than 6 inches from your deployment zone. This cannot be performed within 2 inches of an enemy, and once performed, that spot you chose is now the ritual site permanently. By the end of the game, sorcerers must perform this mission action 3 times on that spot for full score. Grand Plan is revealed in turn 1, and your opponent must select an objective outside of 6 inches from their kill zone edge, as well as 1 operative. If that operative is incapacitated, a point is scored. If that objective is controlled by the Warpcoven at the end of a turning point, the other point is scored. A couple mission action based Tac-ops here, which are normally an issue, but since the sorcerers have access to the mutant appendage boon, these are a lot easier to achieve than you would think. Let's take a look at the equipment the Warpcoven will have access to when trying to achieve these missions. No grenades here, interestingly. Instead, we have the Gargoyle Bayonet that earned a buff recently. It provides Rubric Marines 4 attacks on 3s with a 4/4 damage line. Doesn't seem like much, but 4/4 in melee can be surprisingly scary for the squishy teams. High capacity magazines give auto pistols, Inferno bolt pistols, or Inferno bolt guns the ceaseless rule for rerolls of 1. Different costs based on weapon chosen. Occult talismans provide units equipped by them a feel no pain of 5+ against psychic shooting attacks or mortal wounds. I'm pretty sure the mortal wound protection is for any mortals and not just psychic caused mortals. Not bad when going against high mortal wound teams. One sorcerer's scroll can be picked to provide a sorcerer 1 spell from a school it did not learn to use once during the match. Arcane robes provide sorcerers a once per battle ability to reduce crit damage that is being inflicted on them to normal damage instead. This doesn't change the attack itself, so mortal wounds and any other crit-based effects would still occur. Ensorcelled Rounds provides Zangor fighters with auto pistols +1 to their damage stats on the pistol, upping it to a 3/4 damage line. Gilded Horns are also Zangor specific, allowing the unit, when it fights in combat, in an activation where it charged, to retain 1 attack dice rolled at a 5+ as a critical, a sort of one-off lethal 5 rule. An interesting list of functions, many of which provide great protection and even a solid melee option. Now, let's take a look at the units that will be using these. First up, we have the Sorcerer. A team can have up to 3 of these on the field, and one will need to be chosen to be the leader for scoring purposes. These units come with a Force Staff, and either an Inferno Bolt Pistol, a Prosperine Copish, or a Warp Flame Pistol. You can only have 1 Warp Flame Pistol per kill team, because it is very strong. We've already gone over the customizations that sorcerers must take when chosen from a list. They are fairly survivable with their 3+ saves, 5+ invulnerables, and 13 wounds. They must be within 6 inches of Rubric Marines when the Marine activates to prevent a loss of APL. When equipped with a Copish, they gain Relentless for full melee rerolls, converting this normally ranged unit into a melee powerhouse. They are able to manifest 1 psychic power a turn normally when not within engagement range of an enemy. As a fun note, when these units are able to cast 2 psychic abilities during 1 activation, they do not risk damage like other psychers from other teams. Their weapon stats are also very good, solid damage lines, armor pen across all ranged options. If you find yourself against a Warpcoven team, you will want to try real hard at bringing any sorcerer you can down as soon as possible. The Rubric Marines come in 3 flavors and are the guard dogs of the sorcerers. Normal Marine durability, but with even more. They all have 5+ invulnerable saves and the All is Dust ability. This gives them 2+ saves against weapons that have a normal damage line of 3 or less. That damage line is one of the most common for guns in Kill Team. This extreme durability comes with a downside. Rubric Marines are unable to move more than 6 inches in an activation. Gunners can equip either a Soul Reaper cannon or a Warp Flamer. Both comes with the AP you would expect from Rubrics and are very effective with their general attacks and damage lines. You'll just have to pick which one works best for whatever situation you are in. Both Warriors and the Icon Bearer come with the Inferno Bolt Gun. Standard bolt gun stat line with the benefit of AP1. The Icon Bearer has unique abilities it brings as well. Like most Icon Bearers, it is counted as being 1 higher in its APL when determining capturing a point. This is great now because the unit is 3 APL passively instead of 2, so in general it can count as 4 for the first time since the team was launched. It also allows 1 sorcerer per turning point within 6 inches of it to use a psychic power for free. solid support for any sorcerer strategies you intend to use. The Zangor have 4 options. All of them have similar stats: 6-inch movement, 2 APL, GA1, 3 defense, 6+ save, and a 5+ invulnerable, 8 wounds. The champion has 2 weapon options. Both start with 4 attacks, 3+ to hit, and a 4/5 damage line. The Great Axe version applies brutal and lethal 5. The Great Blade version is lethal 5 and reap 1. They also come with Savage Assault. For 1 action point, you can fight a target you are engaged with. Afterwards, if you are still in engagement of an enemy, you can fight again for free. Fighters have 2 loadouts, either an auto pistol chainsword combo for pseudo range, or Zangor blades for all melee and full rerolls. The Hornbearer comes with a dagger and the ability to add 1 inch to all Zangor movement after it uses its Brayhorn ability. The Icon Bearer also has a dagger and the usual ability to be considered +1 APL when capturing a point. It also provides Zangors within 3 inches of it a +1 to their invulnerable save after it activates the Herd Banner ability. There are a lot of units here, but you can't take them all. The Warpcoven is a very adaptable team game to game, so let's take a look at building a roster. A reminder, for competitive play, most teams get 20 slots to fill to build teams from over the course of a tournament. The Warpcoven, having so many units, gives them many options. The big one comes from the sorcerers. A kill team is allowed between 1 and 3 on the field. You must always take 1 as a leader at the bare minimum. Every sorcerer added to a roster must have a boon, psychic school, and weapon loadout attached. This allows the roster to have many sorcerers with lots of variety, but you have to take into account the limitations. Remember, when a boon is applied, it cannot be picked for another sorcerer, so if 2 types of sorcerers would benefit greatly from fly, you cannot have them both in the roster. Also, in building a team, the units added past the leader are based on a sort of point system. Rubric Marines and Sorcerers count as 2 points, Zangors count as 1. The total points usable for the team is 10. I feel I need to be clear. These 10 points don't include the sorcerer you use as a leader, so don't factor that into this. Bare minimum, you would want 3 sorcerers to take up 3 of the 20 slots. Personally, I tend to go with 1 bolt pistol user, 1 warp flame pistol user, and 1 copish user. Provide them a boon and school that matches an overall strategy you may consider your common approach. My method is either Crystalline or Empiric Ward and Tempiric Discipline on the bolt pistol user. This makes it a backline support, helping the rubrics back there and providing the map-wide movement debuff as often as it can. This one tends to be my leader. Immaterial Flight or Time Walker, and either Destiny or Tempiric on the Copish. Good speed to get you to the front line. Flux Blast from Vantage is a very scary prospect. Twist Destiny before charging an enemy and fighting can be great. Lots of good options there. And on the Flamer, either Mutant Appendage or Incorporeal Sight and the Warpfire Discipline. A Flamer Sorcerer is devastating from close without needing to be in melee. Warpfire lets it harass enemies, and Warp Portal allows it to go through a lot of terrain, making it a very threatening unit. Mutant Appendage would allow it to perform mission actions on the front line as well, even after expending all of its action points on casting Warp Portal, appearing in front of enemies, unloading a Firestorm and Flamer Pistol on the units. This lets the unit get things done without any rubric support. Now, a full contingent of rubrics can fill a chunk of the list. 1 Icon Bearer, definitely. 1 Gunner with a Soul Reaper. 2 Rubric Warriors, a Gunner with a Warp Flamer. It is normally rare to not take all 3 sorcerers, but if you do, all of these Rubric Marines can be used. If for some reason going 1 sorcerer and all rubrics sounds good to you, maybe add another Warp Flamer Gunner on the roster for a chance at double Flamer. Close Quarters Horror. 9 slots filled. For the rest, you could fill with Zangors if you want. 1 of each champion option. 1 Brayhorn, 1 Banner. 7 options for fighters, blended how you want with either blades or pistols. Now, this makes the roster limit an issue. I wouldn't do this with Zangors, because I tend to never run an Oops All Zangors list. I would certainly take the 2 champions and a fighter, usually with Zangor blades. I would then add several alternate options of sorcerers, like the variations listed before. That way I can make adjustments based on map layout and opponent as I go. After adding a handful of those, you can fill out some extra Zangor fighters, just in case you want to attempt to access the recon Tac-ops. You'll need at least 7 slots for Zangors, unless you were fine settling on 1 champion option, then 6 will see you through. Now, let me show you a weird concept with the Warpcoven that might ignite your imagination a little. We'll just show one concept, and it's going to be very specific. Close quarters, and it's time to try and take a room. There is a capture point in the middle that is currently held by the enemy and costs a point to change ownership. Currently, there is 4 APL on the point. There is also an unactivated melee enemy in the room nearby. On the Warpcoven side, there is an icon bearer that has gone, the Warp Flamer, Warp Fire Discipline Mutant Appendage Sorcerer in Conceal that just activated, and a Rubric Gunner with the Soul Reaper Cannon that has gone, did not move, and used Guard in Engage. Psychic Dominion is in play from the strats for double cast. Here we go. Top of the activation, the Sorcerer changes to Engage. Mutant Appendage allows the door to be opened for free. Infernal Fire is cast on the unactivated melee unit in the room for free from the Icon Bearer. Warp Portal is cast on the unmoved Gunner within 3 inches of the Sorcerer, moving its position into the room and on the point. 1 action point spent of 3. The Sorcerer then moves onto the point and captures, thanks to the 3 APL boost from the Gunner he moved. He is out of position though, so for a command point, Capricious Plan is used, giving the Sorcerer a free dash to reposition behind the Gunner. The way the ploy also reads makes it sound like you're supposed to change the order of the unit that makes the dash, which is why I changed it to Engage in the first place, allowing it to go back to Conceal, and then being behind the Gunner provides it the cover it needs to be untargetable by other units that may come into the room later. Now, even if the melee unit charges, all it can reach is the Gunner. Point blank Overwatch would be used with full rerolls. If it moves to try and retake, same deal. This makes the room very dangerous. So many actions taken, so many for free. This is a commonplace thing among the Warpcoven, trying to figure out how to make massive plays with all the tools and options they have at hand, despite having so few units. Keep that in mind when either piloting them or playing against them. Thanks for watching. Do you have any experience with the Warpcoven? Any fun stories? Any thoughts on the balance as it is now? Let us know in the comments below. Maybe drop some tips for people looking to try new things with them. As a reminder, there is a link below to our community Discord. We'd be happy to have you. And as usual, likes for the like god and subscribes for the subscribe throne. I am Kimerix, and I'll see you in the next one.